Welcome to Speed Talk Live, which isn't really live, but a poorly produced podcast where we talk about NASCAR and all things racing. And occasionally we have a special guest or two, when we can get them to show up. Sit down, strap in, pull those belts tight. Speed Talk Live is on the air.
Pace car is in. Green flag, green flag, green flag.
Welcome everybody, another week, another edition of Speed Talk Live. It's a busy week coming out of Kansas, going to Talladega, a lot of news going on. I'm Greg Engel, editor-in-chief, cupscene.com, here with my favorite English resident, because you're not English, but you're American, but you're in England, and my favorite future lawyer, Owen Johnson. How are you, pal?
Hey, Greg, I'm doing great and having fun in England.
How can you not have fun in England? I mean, come on. It's something we didn't talk about last week that we should start out with this week is the final edition of the Grand Tour. That's how you and I met in a roundabout way. They had started a website back in 2016 to support the Grand Tour. It was called Drive Tribe. I was one of the first beta testers, one of a group of about 30 that was one of the beta testers, and rode that horse all the way to the bitter end. I think it ended right during COVID. We had so much fun with that site, and Owen was a contributor. You were a contributor as well, and we had a blast with that site. Got a lot of merch. I meant to wear my shirt today. I have a Drive Tribe shirt and a hat they sent me, but we had some staff meetings during the time when it wasn't cool to be on Zoom. I know that the boys, Jeremy, James, and Richard, would have staff meetings, and I know one time they had them from the office in London. And something happened with the stream, and they said, call us back in 30 minutes. And 30 minutes later, they were in a pub, and that's really held it. I know you remember that, Owen, but yeah, that's where we first met was on Drive Tribe, and you transitioned over to not only writing for Carganza, but cupscene.com. And when did you start on the Drive Tribe site?
I started a few years later. I started just producing content for the fun of it, and then they ended up picking me up, and I worked on the USA newsroom. And from there, I started doing some NASCAR content. Realized I loved it, and got this awesome opportunity to do it here with you.
Yeah, so it was really strange because we really had no notice. We didn't. I mean, we made a couple bucks off of it, but it was never. You're never going to make a full-time living at it. But I remember they would pay us in British pounds, and we would have to convert it. So you always hoped that the dollar was high against the British pound when we got paid once a month. But yeah, so Drive Tribe went away, but that didn't take away my love of the Grand Tour, and before that Top Gear when it went through its whole iteration. And when they finally ended and we had the last Grand Tour this last 2 weeks ago, it was a sad thing, but I'm happy for the guys. It's really an honor, and I know it is for you, Owen, that to say that in a roundabout way we worked for them for a time, and we can put that on our resume. So it was sad to see them go. Obviously, Jeremy is still very successful with his Jeremy's Farm, and you should go. You should go to his. I don't think it's too far out of London, but you should probably go up to Jeremy's Farm and ask him if he's still got any Drive Tribe swag he can give you.
I'm trying to. It's just a little bit hard to get to. It's nowhere near any train station or anything, so I got to get a bus out there. But I will one of these breaks. Yeah,
or just I don't know how much a rental car is over there, but something. Maybe we'll get Jeremy to pay.
Learn how to drive on that side of the road.
Yeah. I remember doing that in Australia and almost killing myself. But anyway, so we forgot to talk about that last week. Forgot to mention it, but it was a great time in both of our lives. Jeremy has his farm now, like I said, and he's got a very successful show with that. James May still pops up every once in a while doing his cooking shows, which are always fun to watch. And Richard has got his gear shop going on. So we will miss them, but we still see him. We just won't see him in all together. And I do hear, and you can confirm this for me if you go out to the farm, because he's got the pub out there now, the Farmer's, the Farmer's Dog. Not only can you have some Hawkstone, but they supposedly have the Grand Tour 10 out there. So that's your assignment, my young friend, is to go out to Jeremy's Farm. I know I've got some, they sent me a t-shirt out of the blue. So I've got a Jeremy's Farm t-shirt. So you have to get you one. So anyway, all right. to the business at hand, and that is of NASCAR. Like I said, we're coming out of Kansas, but before we get to Kansas, they made a major announcement last week that ruffled a lot of feathers, and that was that Ticketmaster is going to take over their ticket systems next year exclusively. Now, here's the thing. When I first saw this, and I'm still a little skeptical, I remembered what was going through their mind with the Swifties and irritating the Swifties a couple years ago. And I'll tell you, you might as well, piss off Satan, not the Swifties, because they had some issues, and that really brought to light a lot of unfair practices. Live Nation owns Ticketmaster, and there's a lot of fees and a lot of ticket scalping going on that Ticketmaster doesn't seem to get or want to get a handle on. And actually, the U.S. Department of Justice has a lawsuit against them and is suing them. So I'm curious to see how it worked out. Now, I did dig a little deeper, and I did do an article over on Forbes about this, that SMI has been using them for several years now for their tickets, and you really don't hear a lot of complaints. So I'm hoping the Ticketmaster plays nice. We'll see how that comes about. It's going to start in 2025. I know you got some feelings about this too, Owen.
Yeah, well, just to put it into context, NASCAR tracks are divided into two companies. Half of them are owned by NASCAR International Speedway Corporation, and half of them are owned by SMI, Speedway Motorsports. And they've been using them for years. So there's a lot of merit, I think, to aligning the systems. NASCAR previously has used tickets.com and SeatGeek as their official reseller. So now every NASCAR track is going to have the same ticket buying procedure. And like you said, I haven't heard any complaints about Speedway Motorsport tickets, although obviously we're lucky enough generally to go sit in the press box and not have to deal with it. But Ticketmaster has a bit of a reputation for artificially low ticket prices with huge service fees. But coming with that is the fact that a lot of those service fees tend to go to, in the cases that you mentioned, to the performer. So I suspect NASCAR will probably be getting quite a big chunk off the top of it. So I'm sure there's a lot of motivation for NASCAR to take that deal.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see. I mean, on the surface, I think the optics are sort of bad because Ticketmaster doesn't have a good reputation, and I'm wondering if they should have announced it like they did, because it was all PR fluff. And of course, obviously, I did my due diligence and reached out to them for a comment, and not unsurprisingly, they decided not to issue a comment. So I'm sure they're aware of it, and we'll see what happens. I likened it to the concert goer, the event goers version of going to the DMV. I think it's going to be, and if it's like that, then all our fears will be realized. But if not, we'll see. But we'll give them a chance. And Owen, you're right. We don't buy tickets, and that's, I think, something people don't understand. I can't tell you how many times when I tell someone I work around NASCAR, they come to me and say, "Oh, can you get me some tickets?" No, I can't get you tickets. The only time I've ever gotten free tickets to a race was the Daytona Summer Race in about 2007, and that's only because, well, it might have been sooner than that, 2007. They had a media day with Matt Kenseth, and we raced go-karts against him, and I won one of the heat races against him. I still think he let me win, but they gave me a couple tickets, and I brought my kids because I couldn't, it's either that or buy tickets. You don't get free tickets. So anyway, we'll see how that works. Speaking of tickets, I got to give you a heads up, Kansas. I wasn't there this weekend, but it looks like you had a lot of tickets you could have sold. I didn't necessarily see the stands brimming with fans. Again, we don't release attendance figures, so we'll never know. But I hope that Kansas doesn't go the way of Richmond and some of the other tracks that, hey, you've got 2 dates, you need to fill them up. So everybody in that area, if you didn't go to a race at Kansas this year, you need to go, but make it happen. Get some general admission tickets through Ticketmaster. Let us know how that goes. And be there next year, because I hate to see empty seats, because there's tracks everywhere else that seem to have a lot of seats that are filled. So that was a little disparaging. But one thing that wasn't disparaging was the racing on the track. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was excellent. Another race where a playoff driver didn't win. Instead, it was Watermelon Man Ross Chastain scoring his first win of the year, and a watermelon was sacrificed on the start-finish line. good to see him win. He made no excuses for the fact that he's a non-playoff driver and he won the race. That's what they're out there for. And I think that's one of the things that makes this sport great with the playoffs, because the MLB playoffs are underway. The team I normally follow, the Tampa Bay, the Rays are not in it this year, and they sucked. But it would still be kind of cool if there was some way they were still playing. But that's not how those playoffs work. But the way NASCAR playoffs work, I love it. I think it's great, and I'm here for it. So Ross Chastain stealing the limelight from the playoff drivers. Hey, I'm all about it. The other thing, speaking of playoff drivers, Chase Briscoe and Kyle Busch had a little tangle. Kyle Busch, late in the race, was leading, and we thought he could pull off his first win. Wasn't to be. Chase Briscoe left him a lane, maybe not enough, maybe drifted up. I don't know. And Kyle ended up spinning out, and afterwards he said he was just numb. And I feel bad for Kyle, and I sure hope he gets a win before the season's over, because I'd like to see him keep that streak alive. Sure didn't help his cause on Sunday. What did you think, Owen?
Well, just talking about Chastain again, we're now 50-50 for playoff drivers to playoff spoilers. 4 races into the postseason, with Buescher and Chastain nabbing wins, Buescher at Watkins Glen. Really interesting, since both of those drivers were within the top 16 in points. They were right on the points bubble coming into the playoffs, but they missed out because of the win in your in system. Now, there's always been talk about the win in your in system. Does this change anyone's mind to see the drivers miss despite good seasons? I mean, I think they knew what they had to do to make the playoffs all season. Buescher missed it by the closest margin anyone's ever missed anything in NASCAR history. At this track again, I can't imagine why they struggle to sell tickets with that finish, but Buescher still missed the playoffs by just that much, but he still missed it. And go out and win now, but it was the regular season when he had a chance to do it.
A couple other stories besides the Kyle Busch story, besides the Ross Chastain winning, and as you pointed out, the playoff drivers. We had the Corey LaJoie Justin Haley seat swap this weekend. That was the odd mid-season or late season seat swap. And it's easy to say, well, Corey won that because Corey LaJoie finished 15th in his first outing with RWR, and Haley coming back to Spire finished 23rd, but he did spin out late in the going. So and it seems like a spin that really wasn't his fault. So but that's how they finished. The other surprise to me was Zane Smith finishing in the top 10. Did so quietly, didn't cause any trouble. And there he was inside the top 10. I think this guy's got it going on. I think we're going to hear more from him as seasons progress, and I think he's a future superstar. Was there other surprises that you saw?
Well, I just want to highlight the Zane Smith element. We talked about at Daytona. He's the odd trackhouse driver out. As they're promoting SVG up to that seat, he is going to lose the 71 ride. It'll be replaced by the 99, or the 88, excuse me. And he's really showing that I feel like he deserves a ride next year. There's some candidates for seats. I think Front Row Motorsports is in that conversation. I think I would be surprised if he didn't end up with a seat. But I think like you talked about moving through the field quietly, it's a very marked contrast to his teammate Hocevar, who's not typically a quiet driver when he moves it through the field. But Hocevar really got in and started off really well. Zane Smith is clearly figuring out these cars. Hopefully he gets a seat next year to really show off what he can do with another year under his belt.
I think it's the maturity level. I think Zane Smith's a little more mature than Carson,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not to take away from Carson, because Carson's a hell of a driver. But I think he's a little more impatient. And most of the time it works out for him, and he has good runs. But other times it comes back to bite him in the butt. And I think Zane Smith is slow and steady, not in a bad way, but I think he's got a more steady hand. So yeah, we'll see how Zane Smith does in the future. Josh Berry, early in the going, spun out and had all 4 tires go down. They towed him back to the garage and didn't even put him on the DVP. They just said, you're out of the race. It was a similar situation that would happen with Ryan Blaney a couple weeks ago. Of course, Josh is not in the playoffs. Rodney Childers, to me, who's his crew chief, I know Rodney, and Rodney's a pretty even-tempered guy. He was really mad about that, and I don't blame him, because there really wasn't any heavy damage, but because they had to tow him back, according to NASCAR's rules, and to be fair, he was out of the race. So NASCAR did say this week that they're going to look at that in the offseason, and I hope they do. All the other major sports look at their rules in the offseason, and I'm sure NASCAR is going to be the same way. Of course, the biggest story away from the track was Hurricane Helene this week. It devastated Western North Carolina. Now, my background, I was in Homestead in 1992. I was stationed at the Air Force Base. I was scheduled to get out 2 days before Hurricane Andrew came through. It was like a large lawnmower came over the entire town. Literally, the house that we had just got done refurbishing and getting ready to put on the market so we could sell it was left with one wall standing. So I've been there, done that, and trust me, my friends, I bought the T-shirt. So it was sad to see. Most of the damage was caused by flooding, a lot of rain up there in places that doesn't normally get a lot of rain. But I was really humbled and really happy to see how the NASCAR community has kicked in, led by Greg Biffle. He was one of the earliest people you saw that was taking helicopters up there, taking supplies, looking for people. And then the Sunday during the Atlanta race, or during during the Kansas race, you could actually go on a flight tracker and you would see teams' helicopters because they don't use them obviously to fly to Kansas, but you could see the team's helicopters up in the mountains delivering food and goods and rescuing people. 160 so far, at least death toll. So our hearts are with them. And later on in the week, Michael Jordan made a $1 million donation. Several teams also are packing up haulers, are still collecting things to take up there because it's so close. Charlotte Motor Speedway, they're going to be doing things at Talladega Super Speedway this weekend, North Wilkesboro. And just today, Bristol Motor Speedway was announced they'll serve as the Northeast Tennessee Disaster Relief Center. So they've got a lot going on. So we can definitely take a lot of things away from that. And we can certainly help. I know when I'm in Charlotte next week, if they're still collecting donations, by gosh, I'll head to the Piggly Wiggly and buy them all out of water and whatever perishables they need and carry them to the track. And one person who kind of put it in perspective, because people, if you don't live in North Carolina, you just follow the sport, but you don't understand why NASCAR is so caught up in this, not only because of the distance, the closeness to Charlotte, but Tyler Reddick, during the regular weekly meeting that we have with the media, talked about why it's a big deal to NASCAR teams and to him as well about what happened in Western North Carolina.
Yeah, it's really close to home. I think I can't personally speak for this, but I think for a lot of people in the racing industry or have family in the industry, they have family up there, or there's a good amount of people in our industry. I feel like that take time to when they have the free time to go up into the mountains there. I've been to Asheville once. I really enjoyed it. I didn't have a lot of time there, and we had to get back home and back to work, but it's really, really pretty. It's a 15-minute flight to Bristol, but it's one of the most fun drives going to or home. Fun for a number of reasons, right? Like, it's a windy road up and down the mountain, but you go through a bunch of little towns. The scenery's just beautiful. Back when I had more free time, I've even rode up Mount Pisgah on that highway, and it's really pretty. So it's tough to see what's happening up there, but I'm really, really proud of everyone at 2311 for doing what they are. And I'm hoping that those that are missing are found, and the loss of life isn't too great. But it's a really crazy situation that unfolded. It's very close to home. It's just crazy to think that an area in the mountains like that could be exposed to such a catastrophic event.
So we'll continue to help as much as we can. We want them to get back on their feet. And like I said, if you're listening to this and you were a victim of that, know that we're out here for you and we're helping as any way we can. And like I said, having gone through it, just remember it's minute by minute, day by day, hour by hour, but it will get better. It'll never be the same, but it will get better. So hang in there. And I know it's rough right now. Even here where I live in Florida, we've gone 10 days without electricity, with no damage, but no electricity. So even if your house wasn't damaged and you're doing without right now, it sucks, but it will get better, and all the help's coming out there. So, all right, let's move on. NASCAR signed this week a new deal where we're going to have I forget the name of tickets and something, play house or whatever, but the bottom line is they're going to have a NASCAR Full Speed Season 2, the documentary they had this year. I liked it. It was fun to watch. I wish they would bring the crew back, if you remember that, the sitcom they had. They only had one season, but I really enjoyed it. I wish they would bring the sitcom back, and maybe they'll reboot it. But I liked, Full Speed. I thought it gave a good insight into the sport. Now, did you binge watch this thing, man? Because I know it's what your kids
Oh, I
do.
absolutely loved it. And I think we know the docuseries. Unfortunately, I guess the sitcom didn't work. The sitcom format didn't work out quite as well, but we know the docuseries format works from Formula One. So I think there's no reason for NASCAR not to repeat it and put it on as big a platform as possible in Netflix. And it did pretty well. So I'm definitely not surprised they repeated and they re-signed it. But I mean, definitely watch it again, keep the numbers high so we get more and more of this. But what really struck me about the announcement was what you mentioned. NASCAR is partnering with a production studio to create, they're calling it Full Speed Entertainment, to produce more shows like this, but also podcasts and studio shows. They just put some new shows up on TV and YouTube recently through their own productions. So this is giving those kind of shows a new home. They're kind of expanding their content, which I think is great. I think the prevalence of NASCAR in movies and TV really helped NASCAR 20 years ago. Obviously, NASCAR was on the up then, and that contributed to them getting those deals. But NASCAR is also on the up now. So I think that more and more deals to get NASCAR in front of as many faces as possible can only be a good thing to help it grow in the long term.
Yeah, I was trying to remember what it was. Full Speed Entertainment. I don't write notes down, so I pretty much suck. It's as old as I am. My memory is terrible. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and yeah, I'll watch it. I'll support it, and if they send press releases, I'll write about it, and we'll write about it. And we'll cover it on cupscene.com. Also have a book review coming. Rare one of those. Herb Branham, a longtime NASCAR employee, wrote a book. Allegedly, he's quoted me in it in a spot. So we'll see. I got the book coming, and I hope to have Herb on this show because he's a great guy to talk to. He used to collect stuff for ISC when they would have, like, if you remember the old pictures of the Union 76 tower that they had at Daytona, and it was an orange ball stuck, I think, in turn 2 or something. It was a spotter stand that NASCAR used. He collected those, and he had them. And when you used to drive to get your credentials, you would see it setting off in the field because that's where they had it. So we hope to have him on the show sometime in the near future. All right. In other news, Bubba Wallace is now Big Daddy. I mean, he was Big Daddy before. Him and Amanda welcomed their son into the world this week. So congratulations to them. Nothing will change your life like a kid. And I'm thrilled for him, and I know everybody else is. The next step in your life is having the kids, and so good for him. No word from Chase Briscoe yet, so Marissa is still humbling around carrying the twins, and that could happen at any time. So that's the baby front. So the big elephant in the room this week is the lawsuit. The lawsuit filed by Front Row Motorsports and 2311 Racing. It is an antitrust lawsuit, and you kind of should have seen this coming because they didn't sign the charter agreements, and they held out. We wondered what the next step was. Well, they fired the shot, hired a big antitrust lawyer who's worked with the NBA and the NFL and other entities with things like this. I'm not going to. You can go read the lawsuit. You could dumb it down and find out. But there's a lot of things that they have wrong with NASCAR that they allege. But there's a couple of good points. NASCAR owns the tracks, the parts, the pieces, and even wants the team's intellectual property rights. So I'm kind of wondering, is that too much? Could this actually maybe tailor, take that down a little bit, and make it a little fairer. I'd like to think so, but in the end of the day, I don't know that it's going to work out for anybody involved. But we just so happen to have a future lawyer on the staff in Owen Johnson. So tell me, Owen, what's your breakdown of this antitrust lawsuit?
Well, unfortunately, I'm over here in England. I don't know American antitrust law as well as I could, but I definitely think it's a bold move, and NASCAR is definitely asking for a lot. They've been negotiating. I expect NASCAR would rather settle. Obviously, it's been a negotiation process for a year, and there's going to be another tough negotiation process coming. But NASCAR is not very open with all their financials, not very open with all the details. They don't even release the track figures like we talked about earlier, the track attendance figures. So I don't think NASCAR wants all the details that would come out in discovery in a case like this to be made public. Now, what I think is really significant is the argument about, is it a monopoly? And obviously, NASCAR really controls all of big time stock car racing, not just in America, but globally. They bought out ARCA, so there's not even an ARCA to go back to. The only alternative is some Cars Tour sanctioned late model racing. But beyond that, NASCAR even owns most of the regional series throughout America too. So NASCAR really has this monopoly, but I mean, so do many other sports. There's not really any competitive. Well, I guess there is now a competitive football league, but for a very long time, there hasn't been a very competitive football league besides the NFL. There aren't very competitive baseball leagues. I think it's an interesting argument. We'll see what happens. I don't expect it to go to court. I don't expect to get a full case, lawyers arguing at each other, but it's an interesting argument nonetheless.
Yeah, and I was on a press conference this morning with the lawyer, part of that press conference, and they were talking about the first discoveries they want to make, which is asking for evidence that they can see, that they put in front of a jury or a judge, or however they decide that they're going to try and take that. Was the financials, and also things like you were talking about, attendance records. I think that we will still hear about this lawsuit up until that happens, because I think when NASCAR decides they want they got to release all this information, and it's going to be as public as it ever will be. I think that's when suddenly they're going to buckle down, and we'll hear about an out of court settlement. If you remember, there's been a history with NASCAR and their control over the drivers in the sport. 1961. Bruton Smith and Tiny Lund, I think it was Tiny Lund, tried to put together a drivers union that was shut down. Both of them were banned for life from the sport. They eventually, the ban was lifted, but Charlotte Motor Speedway went into bankruptcy because of it. And in 1965, I think it was 1966, they emerged from bankruptcy and they were allowed back into NASCAR. And then obviously, fittingly, coming into Talladega, that race, the inaugural race of that in 1969, they had some issues in tire testing, and a group of drivers didn't feel like it was safe. So they formed the Professional Drivers Association, led by Richard Petty. And there's 11 drivers in the PDA, the Professional Drivers Association, who decided that they were going to boycott the race unless it was made safer. Well, Big Bill France was still around, and he's put the kibosh on that, and basically made the field without Richard Petty and David Pearson. So they weren't in that inaugural Talladega race. And after the race, the PDA fell apart. We really didn't hear about it until we really haven't heard any kind of labor issues until these recent years. Now we've got the Race Team Alliance, which I don't think it's as powerful as everybody thinks it is, and they think they are. So we'll see how that goes with that. I just think that once they start to have open in the books, I think that's when we're going to get the out of court settlement. And I know you weren't around in 1969, obviously 1961. Neither was I. But so what are your final thoughts on this before we move on?
Well, just in the context of unions and the PDA and everything like that, when you talk about the team union and the team association, we saw NASCAR split the teams up during negotiations and come to them equally, refuse to negotiate with them as a collective group. So NASCAR has not changed from being a fan of these collective deals, these collective bargaining agreements, and they're going to try to split up the teams as much as possible. I think what's really significant is that two teams are going in at this together. I wonder if that'll change anything, especially a team with the financial backing and the public support of Michael Jordan. I think they might be willing to push it a lot more willing than NASCAR is. And I think if it does go to settlement, I think it could be quite favorable for those two teams.
Yeah, we'll have to see. There was some talk of it could fundamentally change NASCAR. I don't think it's going to fundamentally change NASCAR. I may think it may be a little fairer for the teams, but hey, we'll see. That's a long time to go. It shouldn't have surprised us, even though it did surprise us when we saw that news break and, had the press conference and everything. So, hey, we'll see how it works out. So anyway, we talked to the scrum this week was Tyler Reddick, who was one of the favorites coming into the playoffs, and I think he still is in my book. But Kansas, he had a quiet day. He didn't score points in either stage, and he's 4 points below the cut line going into this weekend at wherever we're going, Talladega. And there's two races left in this round that he has a chance to redeem himself. So with two wild card tracks remaining in the round, what's his mindset of these two tracks? How does he sort of mentally work through the concern that he needs to point his way in, but stay focused, or does he just keep it in his mind that he wants to make it through the round?
I feel like for me in my past, when things don't go well, it's been a great opportunity to just really dial it in even further. I think all of us try to bring our best every single week. But when we start getting a little adversity or things aren't going our way, I don't think anyone on this team or here in this organization bows down from something. So we're going to attack it. But again, I think back to early in the year for us at Talladega. I know things had to play out a very specific way, and they did, but it allowed us to win. But I feel like our mindset on the speedways has been a good one. When we have a car that isn't wrecked, we can advance our way through the field. It's up to me, though, in some of those situations to, once I get to the front, stay there. That can be a challenge at speedways. But, yeah, also at the Roval. Last year for us, we went into that race needing to score a lot of stage points and sat on the pole, won the first stage, scored a lot of stage points, stage two, and then kind of did the unthinkable in stage three and just drove back through the field into the top 10. So, if we can bring that intensity and mindset to the Roval that we had last year, we'll be in good shape. And I think our mindset for Talladega in the spring was a good one as well. I think they'll run it the same. I think the whole field will. You might have a couple stragglers that just say, "To heck with it all," right? That run to the back all day. Those drivers and teams are completely counting on some really big wrecks in the closing laps to get their track position that way. But in my opinion, playoff or not, I feel like you have to have the same strategy if you want to be up front towards the end of this race without the crashes if those don't happen. So I feel like majority of the field will probably be using the same approach.
And also heading into Sunday's race at Talladega, which he won in the spring, he was asked if he thought there would be differing strategies between playoff drivers and non-playoff drivers to try to get those stage points throughout the end of those. Is everybody going to run the same plan as they have been in the past, or we're going to see something different?
I think they'll run it the same. I think the whole field will. You might have a couple stragglers that just say, "To heck with it all," right? That run to the back all day. Those drivers and teams are completely counting on some really big wrecks in the closing laps to get their track position that way. But in my opinion, playoff or not, I feel like you have to have the same strategy if you want to be up front towards the end of this race without the crashes if those don't happen. So I feel like majority of the field will probably be using the same approach.
So my pick for this weekend, at Talladega, I'm kind of siding with you on this. How can you pick who's going to win at Talladega? Um, Obviously, Ryan Blaney used this as a staging point last year for his title run because he won and went to that propelled him to the next round, and he came in kind of as an underdog and below the line. So you know what, I could see Chase Briscoe playing the spoiler, right? Coming in, surviving till the end, winning this race, moving on to the next round, and being, and propelling himself forward. I mean, I'd like to say that, and I'd like to see that because I think it'd be a great story, especially if his wife had the babies, that night, and he had to fly home to that. But so who you got for Talladega Sunday, my friend?
Well, it is definitely a difficult track to make a pick for, and I think it's going to be so interesting with the different strategies, especially it's not just Talladega, but it's the Roval the weekend after. So every driver and there's no lock in yet. So every driver has to really try to get as many points as possible in every stage and at the end of the race at a track like Talladega. So there's really no predicting what's going to happen, I don't think at all. But a couple of drivers who've been good there in the past couple of years, Ryan Blaney, like you mentioned, and Chase Elliott, who's another playoff driver, I would be a very popular win as well. So I have my eye on those two, but I can't give you a specific pick for a track like Talladega.
Yeah, so we're in agreement. And NASCAR did make some changes to the cars to help keep them from rolling over. So we'll see. Hopefully nobody ends up on the roof this weekend. But I also wonder if NASCAR kind of threw them a curveball with the changes. So some teams may have had their cars set up. I'll be interested to see not just Chase Elliott, but all the Hendrick drivers, because they're normally very strong there, or whether Kyle Larson can overcome the adversity he's had the last two races. So he's still, in the points. And then qualifying is going to be a big deal too, which normally to me, qualifying isn't a big deal at other tracks. But you're a big qualifying advocate at Talladega.
Well, I definitely am a big advocate just because, especially this year, to see Front Row Motorsports have their qualifying resurgence and really, I think, out-qualify almost every other team, just with some really consistent performances at the super speedway. So I would be interested to see if Front Row Motorsports, obviously neither of their cars are in the playoffs and their primary drivers leaving next year, but it'd be interesting to see if they can get a pole and show some of that resurgence as they become a Tier 1 Ford program. All
right, well, there you go. Front Row Motorsports will sweep qualifying, and God only knows who the hell will win Talladega, but we'll be watching. We'll talk about it next week. Again, our thoughts and our strength, we're sending everybody in Western North Carolina and Tennessee in that area. We hope that you're getting back on your feet. I'll be at the Roval next week, like I said, and I'll make sure and bring some donations and help out however I can. So your assignment, young man, is to try and figure out how to get up to Jeremy's farm and tell him he still owes us money and just see what he says. Now, well, I don't know. We'll see. But go up there, have some Hawkstone beer, and see the Grand Tour tent. And we want you guys to stay safe. We want you guys to have a great rest of your week. Have fun at watching Talladega this weekend. We will talk to you next week. Take care, everybody. Thanks for listening to Speed Talk Live. For questions or just to tell us how bad our production is or to leave other feedback, leave us a comment below. For all the latest NASCAR news, visit www.cupscene.com. Until next time, peace out and let's go racing.
All right, there's the checkered flag. Great job, driver.